Well, David is dealing with conflict and adversity in his life once again. In fact, much of David's life was embroiled in conflict, suffering, and adversity and hardship. And we need to remember that David's life is set before us in the Bible as representative of the lives of all God's people. We are like sheep accounted for the slaughter, says the psalmist. For your sake we face death all day long. Paul takes that up again in Romans 8, verse 36. But even more significantly than this, David himself is set before us in the Bible as representative of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Lord Jesus Christ, who would gain his victory only through suffering. Well, let's look briefly at three things here in Psalm 8. David's conflict, David's complaint, and David's confidence. Let's look first at David's conflict. David is being maligned, he's being slandered, he's being pursued, he's being persecuted by a host of enemies. He's been falsely accused of something, and his enemies are on the prowl seeking to overtake him. David is outnumbered, he's tactically disadvantaged, he is utterly vulnerable. We read in the second half of verse 1 and verse 2, "Save me from all my pursuers and deliver me," says David, "lest like a lion they tear my soul apart, rending it in pieces with none to deliver." And that's David's conflict. Well, let's consider in the second place David's complaint. Well, we see that David is personally assailed, personally slandered and pursued by his foes. His complaint rises higher than his own personal adversity here. David grieves the sin all around him in this world. His own conflict with his own enemies, just one instance of that sin that's all around him in the world. We read in verse 9, "Oh, let the evil of the wicked come to an end," says David. "And may you, God, establish the righteous, you who test the minds and hearts, O righteous God." If you and I, who claim to belong to God, never find ourselves uttering these words in prayer, we have good reason to question whether we truly do belong to God. This is the cry of the godly in this world, grieved at the sin all around them, praying that sin would be finally overcome and eradicated by God. That's David's complaint. Well, let's consider in the third and final place David's confidence. We see that David, in spite of all that he is facing in his adversity, nevertheless, David is not given over to despair. This is a psalm that rings with a note of triumphant confidence. We read in verse 17, as the psalm comes to a close, "I will give to the Lord the thanks due to his righteousness." David anticipating God's deliverance and God's righteous victory. "And I will sing praise to the name of the Lord the Most High." Well, what gives rise to such confidence on the part of David here? Well, two things: David's conscience and David's God. David's conscience is clean before his God. We read in verses 3 through 5, as David examines his own heart before God, "O Lord my God, if I have done this, if I have done what my enemies are saying I have done, then let me be overtaken. Far be it from me," says David, "to be delivered from the consequences of my own sin." But David, after examining his own heart, comes away with a clean conscience. Verse 8, "The Lord judges the peoples. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to the integrity that is in me." as far as this particular accusation of his enemies is concerned. David's conscience is clean. The Puritan Thomas Watson said this: no flattery can heal a bad conscience, so no slander can hurt a good one. That's a good quote to remember. A good conscience is like a best friend in our walk with the Lord. But the ultimate source of David's confidence here is his God. Verse 10, my shield is with God, who saves the upright in heart. And it is David's confidence in God that led him in the first place to cry out in prayer that God would come to his rescue and deliver him. So let us, as the people of God, keep a clean conscience before our God and a firm trust in his power and willingness and eagerness and readiness to deliver his people from all their enemies in this world. That's Psalm 7.